Now we're going to talk about a new kind of rollover. So instead of just my image changing when I mouse over, the image that I'm on changing, what I want is to create a remote rollover, meaning when I'm in this layout, when I'm over the image of the chocolate, this larger image of beets will switch to a larger image of chocolate. When I'm over cucumbers, this larger image of beets will switch to a larger picture of cucumbers. So this is called a remote rollover. Incidentally, I can assign 2 rollovers to an image. So my cucumber image could swap over to another image here, physically in this spot, and change the beet image to a larger picture of a cucumber. But for this practice, we're just going to do the remote rollover. So what I have set up already before from Photoshop is I have the thumbnail versions of my image, and then I have larger versions. So I have beet large, Belgian chocolate large, and cucumbers large. And what's really important is that the 3 large images are all the same size. So as I mentioned before in the first rollover video, you can't swap an image into the spot of another image without them being the same size. If they're not the same size, they're automatically, the one that's swapping in is going to take on the dimensions of this one. And if it's not the same dimensions, it will get distorted. So that's just what you want to make sure of in Photoshop, that they're all set to be the same size. So now that I've set this up, and all I did was I have a div here that's set up to be wide enough to contain all of my images. And actually, let's preview this in the browser. I'll talk about a couple of changes I can make. So what's not very nice is that this larger image is not centered. So I can do that by clicking on the image and going up to Format, Align, Center. And that's now centered. So let's preview that in the browser. And great, so this is now centered, but these guys are not centered down here. So let's do that. I just need to click on my first thumbnail and go to Format, Align, Center, and save it and preview it. And now they are all centered as well. Now my first image is a little bit, what I would say is too large. I want that when I first see this, even if I'm viewing this on a laptop, to be able to see everything. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit in Photoshop. In Dreamweaver, holding the Shift key down, I'm grabbing an anchor, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. And let's save that and preview it in the browser. And it could still be even a little bit smaller, so I'm going to do a bit more. Still is a large image, but I'd like it to be a bit smaller. That's perfect. Okay, so now I can have some text up here, and the idea is that I can see that there's more going on the page. It still is significantly larger than these, and these thumbnails, this is just a guideline, they could also be smaller. Now what about what I just said, how my images that are going to go in here, my larger images, have to be the same size as this target image. Well, in this case, they're a little bit larger, so what's going to happen is Dreamweaver, or the web page, is going to resize them. But because they're going from larger to smaller, that's okay. And it's not a huge significant size difference. If it was really big, I'd want you to redo them in Photoshop so you could resample them and make them smaller file sizes. So going down to my thumbnails here, I have to open up my window for the behaviors. And I'm going to click on the plus sign. And the first, I'm going to go to Swap Image. And, oh, there's one step that I forgot. Okay, so just I can point that out while I'm here. As I said before in the last video, the one that's highlighted here is the image that I'm on. But actually, the one that I want to swap isn't this image. It's going to be this image. So to know what that one is, I need to give my images IDs. So instead of just being named unnamed image, I know what they're called and I know how to grab this one. So I'm going to cancel this and go back. Click back onto this one up here. And down in my Properties Inspector where it says ID, I'm going to call it large beet. And if you get confused, you can ID all of your images, but I'm not going to for right now. I'm going to go back up here, and now when I click on the swap image, I can see large beet is one of my images. So my goal is not actually to swap this one. My goal is to swap this one, large beet. And although I'm on large beet and we won't see the difference, I'm still going to set the source, browse, to, I have to go to my right, the correct folder, which is the products folder, to beat large, and click OK, and click OK. So nothing's actually changed because it already was showing this image, but I want to still set that swap, because then when I'm on these other images and then I click back to the small beats, I want to be able to get this larger beats back. So let's continue on. Now I'm on the chocolate. I click on the plus sign and then go to swap image. And now I'm going to switch to large beat, where it says set source to. I'm going to set the source to the large chocolate image. Okay, so I'm not changing the image that I'm on, the thumbnail. I'm changing this image. And hit OK. And I get my 2 lines of code here. Let's do the last one. Click on the cucumber thumbnail, go to the plus sign, swap image, and move it to large beat. That's the one I'm going to swap. And who am I going to swap it to? Cucumber's large. And click OK. And then click OK. So now let's save this and preview it in a browser and see if this is working. So now what I want is when I hover over the cucumbers, my large beat changes to large cucumber. I hover over chocolate, and large beat changes to the large chocolate, and the same thing happens over here. Now, on this particular example, my thumbnails are very close together, and it's not a problem that actually what's happening when I go between one to the other is it actually for a brief second restores back to the original beat. We can't see it because they're right next to each other. If for some reason these images were a lot smaller, and let's see if I can make them smaller, and I'll add some margins here between them. That's in my ID called middle. So I'm going to write a compound selector. It looks like I have something extra there. Compound selector targeting middle, the IMG, and I'll put a margin left of, let's see if I have room for 10 pixels. And let's save it and preview. Let's see if this will work, my example. So now, because I have space in between, you can see how actually when I go from image to image, there's this really fast flicker that happens of it going back to the beat image between chocolate and cucumber, because I have margins, and so it very quickly restores back to that original image. So this is an example of when you may actually want to take out, if you have space in between your thumbnails, that swap image restore. You may want to take that out so that it doesn't go back to the original image, which is the beat image, and it just stays on whatever image was last. So now if I save it and preview, now when I go between the two, it doesn't swap back to the beat image. It's just going to stay on whichever image I was on last. Okay, so this can be a really nice way to make a photo gallery. You can have your thumbnails a lot smaller if you want, even, because you're going to be able to see the larger image. The key is just make sure that all the larger images are in the same direction and same size. You could also create multiple galleries, because it's ideal if we can kind of see everything without having to scroll. The thumbnails could be on the sides, and so we're hovering here and it's just what's in the middle, and then there could be another set of gallery that you would get to if you scroll down the page. So this is just kind of one basic example of the layout, but you can certainly tweak it to work for your own particular needs.